Act of Person with Disability Act 2007. Person with disability or disabled person shall mean person who encounter certain limitation in performing their daily activities or social participation due to their impairment in vision, hearing, mobility, communication, mind, emotion, conduct, intellect, learning, or any other impairment, disabilities along with various difficulties and specifically needs some assistance to enable them perform their daily activities or social participation same as ordinary persons. The type and prescription of disabilities shall be as determined and announced by the Minister of Social Development and Human Security. Now Thailand is in the process to appoint subcommittee on disability legislation to consider many parts of the act that need amendments, including by providing a specific definition of reasonable accommodation and specifying that denial of reasonable accommodation is a form of discrimination. The subcommittee will replace the former subcommittee on subordinate legislation of the empowerment of persons with disability 2007, which just finished the term. For the past 2 years, there has been ongoing debate among government agencies, disabled people's organizations, related civil society organizations, experts, and other stakeholders on this issue. As principle, the government is supportive of the proposed amendment that they are in line with our obligation under the CRPD. The National Committee has appointed subcommittee on legal assistance for persons with disability and the subcommittee on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against persons with disability to receive complaints and requests for legal assistance. The subcommittee on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against persons with disability received complaints mostly related to discriminatory practice by employers, both in government and private sector. After Channel 2 received complaints, apart from this, persons with disabilities can also file complaints directly through various channels such as police station, home for persons with disabilities, local administrative office, hospitals, provincial social development and human security offices, disability service center, Damrong Tham Center, the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, One Stop Crisis Center, the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security with 1300 hotline, also takes call for urgent assistance or inquiries from PWD, people with disability. Complaint in NHRC, only one case has been filed to the National Human Rights Commission on or NHRC in 2011. Is the case involved the Provincial Land Reform Office denying issuance of land title document for a person with disability. Such denial was based on the ground that person with disability is not qualified as so-called with imperfect physical condition. In accordance with the office regulation on farmers eligible to utilize public reform land, the NHRC then detected that this is a case of discrimination against persons with disability and requested the office to look into the issue. This regulation was later on amended, taking into consideration the principle of non-discrimination as recommended by the NHRC. And also various channels can complain, like a complaint to the subcommittee. Since September 2012 until now, there are totally 28 complaints from persons with disability to the subcommittee on elimination of all forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities. These complaints based on discrimination consisted of cases involving legal contracts, employment in both government and private agencies, education, domestic violence. Among these complaints, 7 are persons with physical disabilities, 9 are persons with unidentified with disabilities, 9 are persons with visual disabilities, 2 are persons with hearing and communication disabilities, and 1 is person with mental behavioral disability. As a result, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability has rendered legal assistance or remedy through the provision of financial support, free lawyer, sign language interpreter. Thailand recognizes the importance of the access to justice for persons with disability, even though there is an absence of a disability anti-discrimination legislation. There have been cases where the court ruled to protect persons with disability from discrimination. These have set good precedents. For example, in 2012, the Constitutional Court rules that the regulation hearing barring persons with disability from being judged and civil servants were unconstitutional on the ground of unjust discrimination and not in compliance with Article 27A of the CRPD. The regulations were subsequently amended. Sorry. Over 600 sign language interpreters have registered and been trained with the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability to provide service to persons with disabilities. This sign language interpreter can be requested through the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security and its provincial officer or through network of organizations for hearing disability throughout the country. The Communication Authority of Thailand and Handicap International Foundation provide real-time sign language interpretation services to persons with hearing disabilities through the Thailand Telecommunication Relay System or TTRS in 2015. 120 TTRS booths have been installed in public places throughout the country with the plan to add 60 more and in 2016. Most TTRS booths are located at the provincial hospitals. We are open and will welcome the suggestion from the committee on this issue to further improve our implementation in line with the CRPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Director General Somchai, about the definition and the relating matters. Question number 2, may I invite the representative of the Ministry of Public Health, Dr. Dharani, to address the question regarding the estimate of persons with disability by the survey of WTO as compared to the National Statistics Office of Thailand, please.
ของคำนิยามของคนพิการที่ว่ามีความแตกต่างของ UN CRPD กับของมาตรา 4 ในพรบส่งเสริมก็ยืนยันว่าใช้
The empowerment of person with disabilities using the same definition as the WTO or the ICF. We are in line with the psychosocial model, but the problem of figures that the difference between 2.4% and the 15% that representing by the WHO, because if we can divide by the problems, the causes, there are two main causes. The first one, on the side of person with disabilities themselves, because person with disabilities who cannot, they are not able to come and to register. Then some types of person with disabilities, for example, those who have the mental disability and the intellectual disability are not able to come and to register as a disabled person because in terms of being registered, there are pros and cons. As a parent side, they view this as a stigmatization. And also it would be difficult for the person with disability to register, to come to register. And the procedure of the registration. And for the newly graduated physicians who can authorize, who can allow who can guarantee the registration, they don't have enough knowledge about the person definition of person with disabilities that could be registered. And for the guidance of that we can bring back, first we would hold a training to educate the newly graduated physicians for this act of empowerment of person with disability. Second, we would have to produce more personnel who can access and to be registered, like audiologists who can grant it for being able to register. And for the assessment, we need to consider more about the social model instead of only the medical model. Lastly, we would try to have more volunteers in terms of the screening to find more persons with disabilities to register
Thank you, Dr. Dharani from the Public Health Ministry. May I, in question 3, number 3, may I now invite Professor Vichit Matapon, legal expert, will address the issue of the definition of dissemination and the current draft constitution. Dr. Vichit, please.
Distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and learn and share. I'd like to address particularly the cluster interlinked with Articles 4 and 5 from the angle of the Thai Constitution. Several of you asked about that. The most recent draft was approved yesterday. Secondly, I'd like to address the question of the PDEA, the Persons with Disabilities Empowerment Act, and its conceptualization of discrimination as well as any possible exception to the rule. And then thirdly, I'd like to fill in information on the BTS case, which is the train case in regard to the need to install elevators, which you asked about. With regard to the state of the Thai constitutions, we are heading towards the 20th constitution, nearly a record globally for various reasons. And I would just note that the first constitution that really bore in mind human rights concerns under the synonym human dignity was the 16th constitution of Thailand, which was promulgated in 1997 with a strong section on human dignity as a synonym for human rights. Secondly, this was further elaborated in the 18th constitution of the country in the year 2007 with a specific article referring to disability as one of the grounds for non-discrimination. Article 30 of the 2007 Constitution prohibits discrimination on various grounds, including explicitly disability. Thirdly, currently, we are in the midst of our interim constitution, which began in 2014. And it's a short constitution because it's an interim constitution, but it implies continuation of the principle of non-discrimination and human dignity as enunciated by the 2007 Constitution, which was abrogated before the interim constitution. Fourthly, in regard to the draft new constitution, the draft which was approved at referendum yesterday, and this is subject to referendum in August, on August the 7th. The draft, which is subject to referendum in August, as finalized yesterday, has various sections touching upon disability, particularly Section 27. Section 27 prohibits discrimination on the basis of 13 grounds, including disability. It prohibits discrimination in regard to 13 grounds, and one of the grounds is disability. Section 71 of the most recent draft constitution also refers to policies to respond to the special needs of persons with disabilities. This is the current state of affairs. And I do respect that some NGOs would like more mention of persons with disabilities in the draft constitution. And this is open to debate, of course, and we are very open about this. But I've just noted what is there explicitly today, particularly in sections 27 of the current draft, as well as section 71, which refer directly, explicitly, to persons with disabilities. Let me now turn to the second question of the Persons with Disabilities Empowerment Act of 2007, particularly its conceptualization of the notion of discrimination, as well as the intriguing and difficult area of whether there can be an exception or not to that principle. 1. Section 15, paragraph 1, Section 15, paragraph 1 of the Persons with Disabilities Empowerment Act of 2007 prohibits explicitly discrimination, whether by government agencies, private individuals, entities, or others. General prohibition under Section 15.1. 2. Section 15, paragraph 2 then provides a definition of discrimination. And the definition is this: discriminatory actions include actions or omission of any action that result in the loss of benefits or rights of persons with disabilities on the ground of their disabilities, even though such action may not be deliberately intended to discriminate against persons with disabilities. So that definition is roughly action, an act or omission that results in the loss of benefits in regard to the rights of persons with disabilities, whether or not it's intended. That is the current definition of discrimination under Section 15, paragraph 2 of the main law of 2007. Thirdly, it is true that paragraph 3 of Section 15 provides for an exception to the principle of non-discrimination. And the exception to the principle of non-discrimination is as follows: discriminatory actions in regard to academic purposes, traditional purposes, or for the public interests can be undertaken or performed, but only when deemed necessary and on a case-by-case basis. This paragraph has been subjected to critical analysis by the NGO sector and others, and the authorities are conscious of the fact that there may need to be an amendment of this paragraph, which is the exception to the principle of non-discrimination. And forward-looking enabling strategy would be to look towards a more holistic, complete concept of non-discrimination. Fourthly, complaints of discrimination, as has been said, can be filed to the Committee for the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, which has now established a subcommittee, and you heard the 28 cases already to date, and this needs to be expanded, of course, in future. And fifth, in regard to that law, it is also possible to take cases to court and other entities such as the National Human Rights Commission. But particularly if cases are taken to court in regard to discrimination against persons with disabilities, the courts can also impose what we call punitive or aggravated damages, up to 4 times the actual damages, as punition against those who discriminate against persons with disabilities. That is the current state of the law, and there is now a draft law to amend it, to improve it, in terms of improving the definition as well as the other possibilities of helping persons with disabilities. Finally, I come to the BTS case. The BTS case is a very interesting and important case in regard to our train system, overhead train system, which sadly has lacked elevators and other facilities, accessibility for persons with disabilities. The situation is as follows, per the court case decision recently. Number 1, the Supreme Administrative Court in January 2015 ordered the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration and the Bangkok Transit System, the BTS, to install elevators and accessible facilities at all stations, including seats for passengers with disabilities in the train, with a total estimated cost of $6.6 million. 2. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities has collaborated with DPOs, very importantly, to hear their voices, as well as the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration and other stakeholders to follow up the case, and particularly in regard to the installation of accessible facilities for persons with disabilities. This means, roughly, that a total of 56 elevators at 19 stations of BTS will need to be built. Thirdly, frankly, as of now, despite the fact that no additional lifts per the court order have been fully installed, construction work is in good progress, about 60 to 40% behind schedule, but construction work is in good progress to install the needed facilities. Fourthly, the BTS organises weekly meetings with the Metropolitan Administration and representatives of persons with disabilities as part of the strategy to communicate with the public on the progress that needs to be made. And fifth, importantly, it is expected that both the BTS and the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration will finish all the instalments of the needed elevators, etc., by September 2016. And finally, to compensate for such delay, the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration will extend the period of coverage for free taxi services for persons with disabilities for 5 more years. And there are 3 centres currently with various taxis in operation. And the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration would like to expand more of the facilities there. So it is hoped in future that the new stations, in fact, the new stations are all to be equipped with the elevators and accessible facilities. And it is hoped, obviously, that the older ones will be rectified to ensure that the lifts and needed accessible facilities are fully installed, hopefully by this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Professor Vichit. Then we go to the question number 4, where I give a floor to Mrs. Aruni, disability expert. We talk about women disability. Please, Mrs. Aruni.
Madam Chair, the committee members, and distinguished guests. My name is Aruni Limani. I'm a woman with disabilities myself because I'm a wheelchair user. First, I would like to thank you, the committee members, for mentioning the issues on women with disabilities. In replying to your question, I would like to start with the policies, the implementation, and activities of women with disabilities, including the support and cooperation between government and the civil service societies, including organizations of persons with disabilities, and the challenges that still remain, including our effort to solve these issues. First of all, the Thai government realized the intersectional discrimination on women and girls with disabilities on the ground of gender and disabilities, and to follow the Sustainable Development Goal number 5 to achieve gender equality and to empower all women and girls. Thailand has several laws and policies on the empowerment of women and girls with disabilities as follows. First is about the Gender Equality Act 2015, which is the legal instrument that provides protection for all women, including women with disabilities, from gender-based discrimination. We also have the Women's Development Plan 2012 to 2016 to promote the rights of women and to empower women in general, but with focus on providing education, enhancing knowledge on human rights and relevant laws, providing job training, particularly for the underprivileged women, women with disabilities, and women from ethnic minorities. And Thailand also has the first strategic plan on the empowerment of women with disabilities 2013 to 2016, which aims to protect and to promote the rights of women and girls with disabilities. There are 6 strategies of the plan. First, to ensure equal access to the rights of women and girls with disabilities. Second, the elimination of the discrimination against women and girls with disabilities. Third, the health and quality of life development for women and girls with disabilities. Fourth, to promote the roles of women with disabilities in general and in many spheres of society. Fifth, to have the support system and mechanism to empower organizations of women with disabilities. Sixth, to promote positive attitudes toward women and girls with disabilities. In terms of financial support and economic development of women with disabilities, the Fund for Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities has allocated approximately $420 per year to support and to ensure effective implementation of the strategic plan. And in 2015, the fund provided support to 65 projects in 63 provinces and to 21 organizations of persons with disabilities that carry out projects related to the empowerment of women and girls with disabilities. Examples of the projects include projects to educate women with disabilities and stakeholders like their personal assistants and the government officials and those who work in the disability service centers to learn and to be educated about the reproductive rights of women with disabilities. And the project on the elimination of violence against women and girls with disabilities, and some other projects concerning the vocational skill training. Thai government also implemented the Incheon strategy to make the right real for persons with disabilities, with goal number 6, to ensure gender equality and women's empowerment. There are several programs that render support to women and girls with disabilities in various aspects. For education, let me start with the education. We have the National Education Act 1999, which guarantees that all children have equal opportunities to receive 12 years of basic education free of charge. This applies to all, including women and girls with disabilities. And there is also the Education for Persons with Disabilities Act 2008 to ensure equal access to education and vocational training for our persons with disabilities. And of course, including women and girls with disabilities. For employment promotion, women with disabilities also benefit from the quota system on employment of persons with disabilities in the ratio of 1 to 100. It means for the workplaces or employers that have 100 or more employees, they have to hire at least one person with disability. So some women with disability also benefit from this quota system. They also have access to the loan for entrepreneurs with disabilities, and the figure is 40% of women with disabilities can get this loan, and this loan is provided for them interest-free, and they can pay back within 10 years. And they also have access to the Women's Rural Development Fund, Thailand, and the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities cooperated with other agencies that promote women's rights, such as the Department of Women and Family Affairs under the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, and the Minda Corporate from Australia, in organizing workshops to provide knowledge and raise awareness on the issues of violence and abuse on women and girls with disabilities, and how to protect themselves from being abused, including the social support network. However, with these policies and regulations and many plans and strategic plans, there are still challenges. Some challenges remain. The first one is, as you mentioned, about the National Committee on the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. I got one question from the committee member that how many women with disability in this national committee. At this stage, there are no, but there are some in the subcommittee level. And as you know that we are in the process of the amendment for the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities Act. One amendment is the quota for women with disabilities in this national committee and also subcommittee level. Another challenge is there's no women with disability in the parliament. As somebody asked about the women with disability in the parliament, but we also have a support system and encourage women with disabilities to have more political participation. And of course, it's not just the right to vote, but to participate actively in the parliament at the policy making level. And regarding the specific questions about the representation of women with disabilities at the policy making level and the Committee on the Fund Management and the Committee on Monitoring of the Fund Management. This committee consists of the members who are women with disabilities. And the Council on the National Plan for Empowerment of Women with Disabilities, in the process of the drafting the plan at the beginning until the process of having the process of appointment of the committee members, their participation from women with disabilities as an individual as well as organizations of women with disabilities. And there are some in the working group on the amendment of the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities Act, which has the first amendment in 2013, and the second amendment is on the way. In this working group also consists of members who are women with disabilities, again at both the individuals as well as the organizations of women with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Aruni. We have already 15 minutes left for the answer. My delegation will keep it short and answer precisely to the committee. Let me go to the question number 5. I'd like to invite Ms. Vichitra to talk about the National Committee, National Fund, and Children with Disability. Please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the member of committee. My name is Vichita Rachata Nantikun, Director of Division of Strategy and Plan, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability. I appreciate the opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the committee today. I hope my response to the question will provide further clarifying and reaffirm my government's commitment to advance the rights of persons with disability. First, allow me to elaborate on the national budget for persons with disability. The annual national budget for persons with disability, which is about $27 billion, has been allocated to 17 responsible agencies. This accounts for only about 1% of the total budget. However, the government intends to gradually raise the budget for persons with disability. For example, just last year, the disability allowance has been increased from $14 to $23 per month. Out of the overall budget set aside for improving social welfare, over 50% is intended for persons with disability and the elderly, many of whom are likely to become persons with disability. In addition, the elderly with disability receive both allowance for persons with disability and the elderly. Other than providing allowance to persons with disability and other people in vulnerable situations, the national budget is also spent on improving infrastructure and public service for persons with disability, such as the modification of homes to improve access and the provision of sign language interpretation for persons with disability at various functions as well as locating person assistance for persons with disability, especially for those who live by themselves at home. Moreover, in order to promote inclusive and sustainable development, the government is also in the process of setting up an institute of technology whose major goal is to foster innovation to improve the well-being for persons with disability. Now, I wish to elaborate on the funds of empowerment of persons with disability. Last year, empowerment of persons with disability has total assets of $265 million. This fund target both of persons with physical and mental disability, including those with physical disability. In the fiscal year 2015, the Fund of Empowerment of Persons with Disability approved a total loan of $14 million to the person with disability, and 49% of the loan was allocated to persons with disability in the agriculture sector, sales, craftsman, and service industry. In 2015, the fund also approved $19 million to support 636 projects as proposed by the 49 agency. To $11 million was allocated for 500 projects proposed by 371 private agencies and the disabled people organization as well. Project proposed worth over $1 million would have to be proposed to approval from the National Committee on Empowerment of Persons with Disability. And the person with disability at the local level and the provincial level in remote area also benefit from the fund through the provincial subcommittee allocation of funding for organization for persons with disability and also to Disability Service Center. The National Committee is now exploring different fund management models. They have a 5 way to have a standard fund to the model. The first one is enhance efficiency of persons with disability since the early stage, consisting of education, social, health, and empowerment, including other support systems. The second one is develop service to support independent living. The third one is integrate related function on empowering persons with disability, for instance, Disability Service Center, Parent Network, and Person with Disability Network. The fourth one is develop database on persons with disability at the national and local level. And the last one is manage the monitoring and evaluation mechanism. Now I wish to respond to the question on the National Committee. The National Committee on Empowerment of Persons with Disability is chaired by the Prime Minister and consists of representatives from 11 government agencies, 7 national disabled people organizations, and 6 disability experts. The experts are nominated by the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security and appointed by the Prime Minister. The National Committee is mandated to meet at least 3 times a year or upon request. And the last one is children with disability. The government attached high importance to the promotion and protection of the rights of children, including children with disability. Apart from being party to CRPD, Thailand is also party to the CRC and all of its 3 optional protocols. The National Children and Youth Development Plan for 2012 to 2016 identify measures to protect children with disability, include specifically children with disability, such as integrating the work at all stages.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have a very limited times, but we have many points to give the committee for the question. But the question number 6 is very important. May invite Ms. Geneva to talk about the accessibility and awareness building. Let me introduce Ms. Geneva to the audience, to the committee. Please stand up. Please stand up, and then you can sit down. And now I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Geneva with such an outstanding and hard-working colleague at my ministry, working on persons with disabilities, and is a key person on our work today. She will answer questions regarding accessibility and awareness building. Please, Ms. Geneva, in a short answer, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, distinguished committee, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to share our experience and practice on disability in Thailand. So regarding on awareness raising, there's many programs to promote positive attitude of the public and the community at all levels. And we conduct the workshop on disability equality training. We conduct every year. And we would like to focus on how disability interact between environment and their condition. So this the workshop we provide for the country, for government officials, community leaders, stakeholders, general public to promote proper understanding on disability and to eliminate stereotype and stigma against person with disability. Although there are many TV programs such as interview reports, travels and documentary produced and hosted by persons with disability, nowadays persons with disability are invited to TV show, program and in the press to show their successful experience and their independent living. And this shows the achievement of persons with disability to the public. For example, our interpreter today and athlete with disability and youth with disability in global IT challenge. In terms of accessibility, the Ministry of Information Communication Technology issued the ministerial regulation on criteria, procedure, and requirement to access and utilize information communication, telecommunication services, assistive technology, and public media services for persons with disability. 2011 emphasizes that government and private agencies supported by the government shall provide information accessibility to persons with disability. And the National Broadcasting and Telecommunication Commission announcement on the promotion and protection of the right of persons with disability to access information and benefit from television program on the 5th February 2016 mandate all registered broadcasting and telecommunication agency to provide sign language, closed caption, and audio description in TV programs. Each channel will have to include these services every year according to the announcement, and assistance will be provided upon request. And the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology has highly recommended government agencies to develop web accessibility to their website. The ministry has developed a website worldwideweb-equipable/society.com to provide guidelines on how to develop an accessible website through the Thai Web Content Accessibility Guideline, or we call TWCAG. And the ICT Community Learning Center was also established by the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology to narrow the gap of people who have difficulties accessing information. And now, today, the number of internet users in Thailand increased from 56.7% to 72.6% that involve persons with disabilities as well. And we also have a 3-year strategic plan was developed to improve the broadband infrastructure in the area. This would be reached out to persons with disability. In terms of related laws on accessibility of public buildings, several laws and regulations have been issued to support government and public buildings to provide accessible facility and environment for persons with disabilities. For instance, the Person with Disability Empowerment Act ministerial regulation on accessible building facilities for persons with disability and elderly persons in 2005, and we also have ministerial regulation on guidelines, requirements, and services to provide accessibility to persons with disability in 2012 and 2013. And according to the Cabinet Regulation on 20 November 2011, all government agencies shall provide an accessible facilities and environment for persons with disability. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability has recorded that such a resolution led to around 8,500 accessible toilets, 9,400 accessible ramps, and 6,700 accessible parking spaces, 9,000 accessible signboards, and 9,000 accessible information services in government agency being provided. And another one good practice done by the Office of Transport and Traffic Policy and Planning, Ministry of Transport, is renovating public areas to provide accessible facilities and environment for all, such as persons with disability, elderly persons, and others. This project aims at renovating public areas in line with the Universal Design Standard. The office would also like this project to be a model for other public areas to be accessible. And the first phase of this project involved renovation for 5 major public areas such as bus station, bus stop, airport, train station, and river pier. And the first phase is expected to finish in this August 2016. And according to accessible learning material, Ministry of Education also provides a budget of around 6 million baht to provide accessible learning materials to students with disability in inclusive and special needs education after going through the individualized education program development. to meet the special need of each student with disability. This would support them to study together in the mainstream education. Recently, the government had supported reading and writing applications for students with specific learning disability throughout the country. In 2015, over 600 teachers and students have been trained by the National Electronic and Computer Technology. The Ministry of Science will develop assistive devices and learning materials for persons with disability to use this application to support education and daily living of persons with disability. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have no more time to answer the well-prepared arrangement to the committee. But lastly, may I ask a legal expert from the Faculty of Law, Thammasat University of Thailand, Professor Virya, to give us some aspect about the legal dimension on the CRPD. Please, only 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Madam Chair. In 2007, I was a member of the National Legislation Assembly, similar to Mr. Muntien Buntan right now. And I was in charge of this law. I mean, I was in charge of the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities Act. I also work with Mr. Muntien Buntan. So I can guarantee you that the definition of person with disabilities, we follow human rights model because this definition came from Mr. Muntien Buntan. He can guarantee to you. Sometimes because of the mistake of this translation, it should translate impairment interactive with other obstacles that will fit to the convention. And at that time, Mr. Muntien was a representative from Thailand, so he worked on the draft of CRPD. So we get many things from CRPD at that time to put into the Empowerment for Persons with Disability Act as much as we can at that time. So I can, you can ask Mr. Muntien that we follow CRPD as much as we can. And even right now, I was appointed to be the chair of the subcommittee on amendment regulation concerned with persons with disabilities. I will put everything that we hear from here and your advice into account and discuss what we can put many things from CRPD into various law. And the second that I want to say that we want to make sure that the right that we have must be real, in order to make the right real. So we use we call the service for person with disability center to do it. And I think
I have noticed from the secretariat. Thank you. He is former the senator of the Parliament of Thailand. For the remaining questions, Madam Chair, we will try to answer tomorrow if the time allows. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my delegation has tried our best to provide answer to all of the questions in cluster 1, please.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Head of Delegation. Thank you for your understanding. We have to abide by certain time constraints, but tomorrow morning you'll have an opportunity to complete any answers that you think require additional information. But now we will hear the questions from the members of the committee on Articles 11 to 20, the second cluster.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Ms. Sylvia Kwan, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Thanks to the State Party for the questions, the answer to the questions, and we hope to hear additional answers tomorrow morning. I will have some specific questions on this cluster, namely Article 16, violence. We've received information whereby there have been specific cases of women with disabilities having been subjected to violence. This is often sexual violence, yet they have not had access to justice because of all the various barriers, physical, information and financial barriers to accessing legal support. Thus, I would like to know if the State Party has any strategy, for example, in the areas of protecting persons with disabilities from violence. In particular, these policies should address women and children with disabilities. We would like to know what you have put into practice and how you have ensured that these strategies and policies reach persons with disabilities in remote areas a long way from urban centres, and also the women with disabilities that belong to the different ethnic groups in the country. Now I have a question on Article 18. I'm concerned at information we have received concerning refugee camps. Most of these refugees come from Myanmar. I would like to know what measures are being taken by the Thai government to regulate the legal status of these persons in your territory. What measures are you taking to ensure that these people have access to basic services, notably access for persons with disabilities? I would also like to know if they have access to certification of their disability and the disability card so that they have access to these services. I wish you a pleasant evening. Mr. Tacic, you now have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Thank you, delegation, for your responses. I have a couple of brief questions. One on Article 13. I would like to hear more about the accessibility of judiciary buildings such as courts and the accessibility of information communication judicial procedures. For example, can a blind person receive documentation in court in Braille print? Once again, tip of the hat to my friend Bontian. And what is the provision of sign language interpretation in court proceedings of all types, administrative, civil, criminal? My second question would be on Article 19, living independently and being included in the community. I would like to receive more information about the funds and concrete financial support that is provided to persons with disability, so a person with disability can hire a personal assistant. And is there any specific curriculum of training for people who will work as personal assistants? I wish you a very good evening, and I'm looking forward to continuation of dialogue tomorrow.
Thank you. Mr. Langblad, please.
I just want to know how the government is including actively DPOs in the design of disaster risk reduction policies? Thank you.
Thank you. Señora Peláez.
Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following the remarks in paragraphs 76 and 77 of your report to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, I would like to know how Thailand protects people from exploitation, trafficking and sexual exploitation. In particular, how do you protect children with disabilities from these phenomena? The Committee on the Rights of the Child denounced sexual exploitation and trafficking of children. They referred to quite a large number of such cases. With this in mind, I would like to know how this affects children with disabilities. Thank you very much, Ms. Kingston.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the replies to some of the initial questions. I'd like to also echo Mr. Langvaard's question about situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies. Specifically, I'd like to know what measures are being taken to include persons with disabilities in national emergency protocols, especially post-tsunami, in line with the Sendai outcome document, especially for deaf people. So, for example, SMS text formats. Also, a question on Article 16. I would like you to provide, if possible, further information on the numbers of women and girls who are subjected to trafficking, especially those with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, and what preventative measures are in place. And on Article 17, most states parties don't want to acknowledge harmful practices that are occurring. But in terms of forced sterilisation, I would very much like to know what further information that you have on this subject, how many women are subjected to forced sterilisation, and whether there is compensation for those who have been sterilised. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yu, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I sincerely thank the delegation for your responses. And also, the last speaker, this lady, and also I can say is one of my best friends. So, congratulations on your excellent work done. And because really, just I mentioned that really I love the Thailand, and also I hope that this constructive dialogue is so effective. So may I kindly advise the state party to answer the questions raised by the members precisely, not only read the whole text of the laws or policies. We really want to listen to the effective implementation of the policies or laws, because we are really concerned that I can say most of the countries despite they have various instruments and undertakings, persons with disabilities continue to face barriers in their participation as equal members of the society and violations of their human rights in all parts of the world. This is my first comment. And yes, and the second is that disability really is a cross-cutting issue. It really needs all the efforts of the functional departments from the state parties trying their best to include disability issues into their national plans or work plans. This is my second point, a comment. And my question now this time perhaps is a little sharp. And based on the information collected from the NGOs or shadow reports, and I think institutionalization still exists in Thailand, and also perhaps in other Asian countries. The institutionalization still exists. And for instance, in the initial report you mentioned, and also since some other shadow report mentions that institution care for children with disabilities, and also special boarding schools for people for children with intellectual disabilities, or special schools still exist. So my question is that, do you have any time framework for shifting the model related to institutionalization from a shift from this model to inclusiveness in the society, for instance, community-based or family-based services, or inclusive education? So we hope that you could shift from that model to this model effectively. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Degener, please.
Thank you for answering our questions so far. My questions relate to Article 12 and Article 14. Have there been any activities relating to reviewing and maybe revising laws, guardianship laws and mental health laws, which are in contradiction to Article 12 and our general comment number 1? And also I would like to ask whether there has been any activities regarding laws and practices of involuntary institutionalization on grounds of impairment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bataru, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, one of my questions has been well dealt with by my colleagues Stig and Diane. And the other one on Article 12 was also touched on by Teresa, but I need a bit more clarification on this Article 12, because I'm sure you're aware of the disability slogan, nothing about us without us. Reading the report, it says Section 152 of the Constitution stipulates that persons with disabilities are entitled to representation by a disability expert in the formulation of any laws that affect them, both directly and indirectly. First question, how do you define who a disability expert is for this purpose of formulating laws for persons with disabilities, laws that affect persons with disabilities? And secondly, is it that persons with disabilities and their representative organizations lack the capacity, to formulate laws other than through a disability expert? Then finally, how do you square the law under Section 152 of the Constitution and that under Section 20 of the PDEA, which encourages participation of persons with disabilities in an inclusive society? Thank you.
Thank you. Tenemos escasos minutos.
We only have a few minutes left. Mr. Luvashi, you have the floor.
Be very brief, I promise. First question relates to disaster risk management. Interested in funding of availability of as well as legislation on safety warning tools and devices tailored to the needs of persons with disabilities. In addition to that, whether this kind of help is provided even for private companies within the framework of providing reasonable accommodation and workplace. The second one is about access to justice. I'm wondering whether persons with disabilities, deaf persons in particular, have access to free or supported legal aid to file lawsuit in case of violation of their rights enshrined in the Convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumara.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very quickly, I equally welcome the Thailand delegation. Chair, I do have actually a follow-up question in relation to Article 4, subsection 4 and 5 and the general obligation, if I may deal with it very quickly and then come to Article 13. It would appear to me, I mean, in my humble view, and perhaps in the committee's view as well, that the famous section 15 of the Empowerment of Disabled Persons Act, in particular paragraph 3, is violative of the general obligations and the convention, which, as it constitutes restriction or derogation from any of the human rights and fundamental freedom contained in the, and equally a violation of Article 4 and 5, Article 4, paragraph 5 of the convention. And my question is, do you intend to repeal same? My question in relation to the second cluster relates to Article 13, which is access to justice. We, I think, should be very, very concerned here that given the existing mechanism for complaints, that you had only 28 complaints. And if I do, I mean, link up this question with Ms. Kwan's question, and even Mrs. Dagana and other colleagues who have spoken before me, if I take a very conservative figure in terms of 10% of persons with disability on a population of 67 million plus, that takes me to 6.7 million people with disabilities, and out of which 1.6 million people, that is 2.4%, are actually gaining some kind of services. Therefore, my question is, how in that climate is it possible for people to vindicate their rights in terms of access to justice within the context of Article 13, vindicate their rights under Article 12, 14, 15, 16, and everything else, and ultimately achieve what we all want here in terms of independent living in the context of Article 19. I think that properly sums up my question. I look forward to that question being answered, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kim, please.
Well, thank you, delegation, for the way that you've been answering all the questions put to you. I'd like to hear from the delegation how you're going to deal with the complex problem of documented, undocumented, and documented non-Thai citizens, which are associated with the administration of the Population Act 1991, which is the basis for issuing a disability card. How does the state party plans to deal with the obligation to protect the rights of undocumented citizens with disabilities and discrimination against bona fide undocumented Thai citizens with disabilities? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Country Rapporteur. I would also like to ask a couple of my own questions to round off. The first concerns criminal procedure. When a person with an intellectual or psychosocial impairment is suspected of a criminal offence and is declared unfit to stand trial, What security measures will be applied to that person? My second question concerns the intersectoral nature of disabilities. I have seen many recommendations from our national human rights institution. I would like to know by what procedure do you implement the recommendations of the Commission? It's not clear to me. I have made many recommendations but do not see how they are implemented. Having asked those questions, we will now bring this chapter of our interdialogue with the State Party of Thailand to a close. We will resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow with the answers to these questions and those which were not answered from the first cluster. We will then proceed with the third cluster of questions. This is all for today. I would like to thank the State Party delegation, but before we adjourn, I will give the floor to Ms. Caroline Harvey for announcement.
There is a morning briefing tomorrow by the Essex University of Essex on Article 12. Thank you.
The meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you so much.